Will the M4 base model Macs finally have 12 gigabytes of RAM and some M4 benchmarks? Let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. Now, just a few short days ago, I made a video on all the new features coming out with the M5 MacBooks. That's coming out in a year and a half. You can watch that video right here. Definitely check that out. There's some design changes coming there, but that doesn't mean that on the M4 MacBooks coming out or Macs coming out later this year, there's not going to be a ton of changes, and that's what we want to go through. Okay, so in this video, I am going to show you some rumors and show you the reason why I think 12 gigabytes might be coming on the base level Macs finally. All right, that's number one. Then we're going to show you some really cool benchmarks on M4 chips, including the M4 Pros, which we haven't seen a ton of. And then also some changes on the motherboard we noticed that could mean a couple different things for the new M4 Macs as well. So sit back and relax and let's enjoy the video. Let's get into it. All right, number one, so why do we think there could be 12 gigabytes coming on the base level Macs coming out soon? Well, let's take a look at this. There's an article here from Tom's Hardware, right? It says right here, let's take a step back because this is about iPads. It says M4 iPad Pros with 8 gigs of RAM may actually have 12 gigabytes. Teardowns reveal possible Apple hijinks. So there's been a couple teardowns, and I'll actually show you over here. So this is another article here, and this is basically from Mac Rumors. It says, do M4 iPad Pros with 8 gigs actually have 12? And you can see in here, if I click on this, there's the chips here, and you can see the model numbers in here. So people were reading those model numbers, and they figured out, they think actually, that they figured out that there's actually 12 in those machines, and Apple's binning them down to 8 or for some reason. So they're offering an 8 gigabyte model and a 16 gigabyte model, all right? But this is on the iPad, so stay with me for a second. So here's the article from Tom's Hardware. So a couple things here. I'm going to skip down here, but let's just read why people are thinking this. So it says the condensed codes for Micron's RAM modules are clearly seen on some teardowns, revealing the exact chips Apple used for their iPads. The 16 gigabyte sure enough contains 16 gigabytes of Micron RAM, but the 8 gigabyte model has 48 gigabit modules on board. Two 48 gigabit modules on board. 48 gigabits converts to 6 gigabytes, meaning that the lower grade iPad Pro has 12 gigabytes of RAM available, but it's in its RAM module, but it's only showing 8 in use. So that's basically proof that it has two 6 gigabyte chips on the iPad Pros there that have the 8 gigabytes. So they have 12 total, but they're binning it down for a reason. And there's a ton of rumors on this, and people are kind of going all over the place, but here's a couple. It says, why would Apple artificially limit its RAM? Theories floated on comment sections across the web, some more charitable than others, basically. It says perhaps no 4 gigabyte chips exist with enough dies to supply the bandwidth Apple demands. The chips are binned for performance, or none of the major RAM manufacturers offer 4 gigabyte chips as standard memory, and Apple couldn't afford to commission custom chips for the poor selling products. It says maybe the part number is wrong after all, which I think we've proved it's not, and Apple is using new custom RAM that has the exact same number as the Micron 6 gigabyte chip, which we don't think is true. So overall, we read through these articles, and it is true. I think that they actually have 12 gigabytes of RAM on that. But what does this mean about MacBooks, right? We're talking about iPads here, but what does this mean for MacBooks? All right, so the theory is pretty easy, right? Apple finally kind of feels Snapdragon breathing down its neck. They have some chips that are coming out that are very close to Apple's chips. Apple's obviously going to beat them with the M4 and then the M5, we think. But still, it's really close. So I think Apple, for a PR win finally, they've heard everyone complaining about this for years. They might be offering these now. So they're getting that board ready for the MacBooks. Now, the MacBooks can actually use the RAM, where the iPads maybe can't use it as much. But the MacBooks will just benefit a ton. It's a 50% increase on MacBooks, if you can imagine going from just 8 to 12. Is that a big increase? Well, take a look over here. So Activity Monitor. Now I have a whole bunch of tabs open. You can see over here. And whenever I have something like this running, this is an M1 Mac Mini. This is an M1 iMac over here with 8 gigs of RAM, the one I'm showing you. So when it's running with all these tabs open, my swap is always like 3 or 3.5 gigabytes of swap, all right? That means it's using the hard drive, not the RAM, and it's kind of eating through the hard drive, right, to help me see what I'm seeing, because I don't have enough memory is what it comes down to. And that's a really regular thing, but it never gets between, it's always 3 and 4. It doesn't usually go higher than that. So getting that extra 4 gigs of RAM on a computer, I think, is a major upgrade for Apple, especially in the base level systems. So while it doesn't seem like a lot, I think the 50% increase, just by showing you that I'm always stuck between this 3 and 4 gigabytes of swap when I have a whole bunch of tabs open and stuff, I think it would fix that problem. It wouldn't be right for power users. I think most people that do like editing and all that kind of stuff should really get 16 or 18 gigs minimum. But for most average users that just do basic stuff like have a bunch of tabs open, this would solve that primary reason right there. And Apple will get a huge PR win on it, all right? So the next question would be, though, is if they gave you 12 gigs standard, would they let you go up to like 16 M2 for an extra $100. That would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? Finally, Apple would give you maybe a $100 option instead of a $200, or would it just be jumping up to 24 gigabytes, which would be kind of crazy, right? And then the other question that's even more concerning is if Apple, imagine this, the M4 Mac Mini comes out and it's got it's got obviously 12 gig standard. It would be a nice system to have, right, for $599. But would Apple be so sinister to make it $699 now, the starting price, and increase the price by $100 just because they gave you the extra 4 gigabytes? I think that would lose the PR appeal. I don't know if people would be upset or happy with that, but overall, I could see Apple doing that. So we don't know if the price is going to go up, maybe on the base level errors, and they're going to give you the extra RAM, but will the actual price go up too? That's the question you got to ask yourself, and if you know Apple, it probably will. All right, so now I wanted to show you some cool benchmarks on the M4 chips coming out later this year. So take a look over here. Here's Geekbench 6 single core scores. Now here's the Snapdragon Elite 12 core system. Now, obviously you can see here it's 2890. This is kind of a rough estimate, but here's the single core scores, Geekbench 6. Apple M3 actually beats it by slightly beats it. You can see right here. So the M3 is already beating it on single core. Here's the M3 Pro. It's obvious they're very close, these two here. But the M4 10 core Apple M4 chip here, this is the base model, will be 3730. Look at the difference here. Huge difference, right? So Apple doesn't have any problem with single core beating Snapdragon. That's a big benefit. That means like doing things like browsing the web or any type of web interfaces or just using certain applications is going to be really snappy. And that's, I think, what most users use these computers for, especially the base model. So that's a huge win for Apple already. And we know that they're going to be beating the Snapdragons pretty handily. But the problem more was the Snapdragons had really, really high multi-core scores, right? And they were actually beating or close to beating the M3 Pros and stuff like that. So let's take a look at that next. Okay, so here's the Geekbench 6 multi-core scores right here. And you can see, I'm just going to start with the M2. This is the base level M2, 9,851. The base level M3, 11,950. Here's the X Elite 12 core. So this is kind of the Snapdragon Elite chip, the kind of their flagship. 14,229. So it did really well, right? I mean, that's where Apple can feel that heat coming down. That's actually good for Apple. It's going to make them maybe give us 12 gigs of RAM, right? And then over here is Apple's the M4 10 core. This is the base level. You can see though, the base level M4 should beat kind of the Elite here, and it's going to beat it, just on the very, very base model. So we think that's going to be a good news for Apple, and we should have no problems there. But then the Apple M4 Pro, this is the 12 core chip. So we're putting a 12 core chip here versus the Elite chip. You can see this giant jump here. It's going from 14,229. This is estimated again to 18,111, which is an estimate. So this estimate right here, well, this one's not estimated really, but this one is, and that basically is based off of a lot of criteria that a lot of people put together based on how Apple iterates their computers. So we think that's going to be very accurate. Do we know 100%? No, but we think it's going to be at least in this range and maybe possibly a little bit higher. So you can see here, this jump is kind of, it's substantial. I don't know what that percentage comes out to, but it's like 4,000 out of 18. I mean, it's 20 or 30% difference. So you're going to get a lot more multi-core if you get that Pro chip. And that Pro chip, again, you can get into some of the systems that are going to be under $2,000, which will be a really good price. Now, a few more things that we saw on the M4 boards that are coming out. We saw that it actually had four times the Thunderbolt controllers on it. The last one on kind of the standard boards only had 2. What does this mean? It means probably that those Mac Minis coming out, the M4, could have up to 4 Thunderbolt ports instead of 2 right now. And this is the base model, not the Pro chip, but the base model, which would be great, wouldn't it? So it does have the 4 controllers in there. I mean, it means even like the MacBook Airs could even get that, but I don't think they're going to change them on the MacBook Airs because they want to separate them from the MacBook Pros. But who knows? The MacBook Airs will have the potential of having up to 4 different Thunderbolt ports, which would be incredible. We'll see what Apple does with it. Maybe it's for future, maybe it's for the M5s or something. But overall, it does have more Thunderbolt controllers on it, 4 versus 2. And I think the Mac Minis are going to see this. I think the Mac Minis will get 4 Thunderbolt ports on it, even on the base model. And you can imagine that with the 12 gigabyte standard, if that comes M4 chip for like $599, that would be a powerhouse of a system. We also see that Apple is updating the display engine also on these boards. So what does that mean? It means more screens. So on the Apple, like for the Airs, for example, you might, in the M3s, you could actually get 2 screens, but you had to leave it in clamshell mode. We're thinking that now on these new M4s, you won't need to be in clamshell mode. So you're going to have the screen in front of you. You can have your MacBook screen plus the 2 or maybe even 3 more screens on these base level Macs, which will be great. So that's even another change on the M4s coming out. Okay, so the question is a couple things. Should he be waiting for the M5 with all the design changes? Check out my other video. Or is the M4, should he pick up the M4 even if you have like an M1 or an M2 or an M3? Well, here I think this. So I think if you have an M1 or an M2, it depends on the situation, right? If it's fast enough for you still, don't give Apple your money. Do not. But if you have a system like I have an M1 iMac over here with 8 gigs of RAM, and you're starting to see that swap happen more and more often, 12 gigabytes on the base model might be worth it to you to kind of prevent that from happening. Or if you want to get that Pro version, the M4 Pro version, and you want a big jump in performance there, that might be worth it to you if you have an M1 or an M2. I think if you have an M3 though, it's not going to be that big of a change. You're not going to notice a massive change there. Still going to be capable of Apple Intelligence and all that kind of stuff coming in the future. So I wouldn't really upgrade unless you absolutely need to from an M3. But like the M5 is the thing you might have to consider just because those possibly they could come out with OLEDs, and check that video. I have a whole bunch of different things they could come out with. So you got to really make that determination based on your needs right now. But I still think that they're going to be great upgrades for a lot of people. Or obviously if you have an Intel Mac or something like this would be a great time to get into the Apple ecosystem because these things are going to be some powerhouses. Okay, like usual, I hope this video helps people out. Subscribe if you can, and it's going to help the channel, help me grow. Please help me grow. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.